we're going to trace through this for loop to see what happens as we're executing a for loop in C. All right, so we're going to come into our program and we'll look at the variables up here that get declared and initialized. So we have sum gets initialized to 0, so we'll track the value of sum. Then we have num gets initialized to 5, so we'll track the value of num. And then we have I, which we declare here. So we're also going to set aside some space for I. Then we get to our for loop, and remember the first thing that happens is our initialization gets done once. So we're going to initialize I to be 1. Then we're going to check the condition, is I less than or equal to num, is 1 less than or equal to 5. That's true, so we'll come in and we'll do an iteration of our loop. We'll say sum equals sum plus I. I is 1, we'll add that to sum and store 1 back into sum. Then we would print on this iteration I equals 1, and on this and sum equals, sum at this point is also 1. Then we're at the end of this iteration, so now we're going to do this increment. We're going to say I equals I plus 1. So we're going to increment I to be 2. We'll check, is 2 less than or equal to 5? It is, so we're going to do another iteration of our loop. We'll say sum equals sum plus I. Sum is 1, I is 2, so now sum will be 3. And we would print on this iteration, I is equal to 2 and sum is equal to 3. We'd then come and do the increment, right, because we're at the end of our loop, so we'll increment I equals I plus 1, so now I is 3. We check, is 3 less than or equal to 5? It is, so we'll come in and we'll do another iteration of our loop. Sum equals sum plus I. Sum is 3, I is 3, so we'll add 3 to 3 and we'll get 6. We would print on this iteration I equals 3 and sum is equal to 6. Then we'll increment I again because we're at the end of our iteration. So I would become 4. Is 4 less than or equal to 5? It is, so we'll do another iteration. Sum equals sum plus I. So sum is 6 plus I is 4. So now sum becomes 10. Okay. And we would print on this iteration I equals 4 and sum equals 10. Then we would do the increment again. We're at the end of the body of our loop. So we would increment I is 5. We would check, is 5 less than or equal to 5? It is. So we would do another iteration. Sum equals sum plus I. Sum is 10. I is 5. So sum becomes 15. We're at the end of our loop, the body of our loop. So we do another increment. I equals I plus 1. I becomes 6. Now we check the condition before we do another iteration. Is I less than or equal to num? Is 6 less than or equal to 5? This is false. So we're done with our loop. We'll exit. And we'll come down and we'll do what's after the ending curly brace. We'll say the final sum is, so we'll end up printing the final sum is 15 because 15 is the final value of the variable sum. So just like in MATLAB, when you want to go through and see what's happening in a loop, you want to trace through it. You can trace through it by putting in these printf statements and then running the code to trace the values of the variables, or you can do what we just did here, which is to trace through it by hand, looking at how the values of variables change with each iteration, remembering that we always do the initialization once at the very beginning, and then we check the condition at the beginning of each iteration. We then do the body of the loop and we increment at the end of each iteration through the body of the loop. And that's how we change the loop control variable as we go through each iteration of the loop.